Johto, my personal favorite Pokemon region, full of beautiful scenery, interesting locations, and incredible lore about some of my favorite legendary Pokemon. And in addition to all of this, Johto is also home to a roster of wonderful gym leaders. These are all honest, hardworking people like Faulkner, who wished to follow in his father's footsteps as a bird trainer, or Morty, who seeks to learn all about Ecruteak's legends. Just don't read the manga if you want your gym leaders to be good people. Video game Price is great, just an old dude vibing with his Pokemon. But the idea behind gym leaders being less than honest doesn't only exist in the manga. In fact, Pokemon Gold and Silver were the first games that introduced a gym leader that we as players were most likely intended to dislike. And no, I'm actually not talking about Whitney in this video. I've already made a video about her, which you can check out after this one. I'll have that one linked in the description. Instead, we're going to talk about the actual worst gym leader in maybe the entire Pokemon series, because while the Whitney battle is just a bit unfair due to the strength of her Miltank, the final gym leader Clair is actually just a shitty person, on top of having similar issues as the battle against Whitney. Don't believe me? Well, let me jog your memory. First off, I just want to point out that this info that I'm starting with in the video isn't necessarily related to Pokemon battling, but rather to Clair's personality. Back in Goldenrod City, when you defeated Whitney, she doesn't actually give you the gym badge immediately, as she's busy crying about losing. And while this is a bit annoying, especially after that particular battle, it's not a malicious act on Whitney's part. Once you return to her, she settles down and is more than happy to hand over her badge. Clair, on the other hand, actually is malicious in this regard. After defeating her, Clair claims that the battle was a fluke and she refuses to acknowledge your skill, so she refuses to hand over the Rising badge. Instead, she demands that you go to the Dragon's Den behind her gym to perform a task which varies based on the version of the game you're playing. In Gold and Silver, you just need to find a Dragon Fang item in the den, whereas in Crystal, you need to take an Are You a Good Person exam. In the former games, Clair relents and gives you the badge once you find a Dragon Fang, but in Crystal, things get particularly interesting. As I've mentioned, in Crystal, you need to answer 5 questions from an elder in the Dragon Tamer clan, each of which are basically asking how you treat Pokemon. If you treat them with love and view them as friends, you are deemed to be a good person and can get a Dratini as a gift. Clair will then show up, expecting for you to have failed, because she states that even she hasn't passed this test before. Think about that for a second. Clair has failed a test that is intended to determine if she's a good person. Or, in other words, she's not a good person and probably doesn't treat her Pokemon well. But like I said, none of this has anything to do with actually battling against Clair, and in this regard, I genuinely think that Clair is the second hardest gym leader to face in the game, as the battle against her has a lot of similarities as the fight against Whitney and her Miltank. But first, let's begin by discussing Clair's type specialty, Dragon. Having a Dragon type gym as the final one in Johto does make sense to me, since there wasn't a Dragon gym in Kanto. However, Game Freak decided to make this gym a lot easier for the player by placing Blackthorn City behind the Ice Path, which of course means we get access to Ice-type Pokemon to help us fight these dragons. Specifically, there are 2 pretty good Ice-type Pokemon that you can catch here, Swinub and Jinx. Although, I do want to point out that Swinub and Piloswine aren't the best Ice types in the GSC era, since they have pitiful special attack stats. However, in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Swinub is an incredible Pokemon to catch, as you'll be able to evolve it into a Mamoswine before you get the Blackthorn, and you'll have access to the physical Ice Shard. Jinx, on the other hand, is good in both the original games and the remakes. Her Ice typing and good special attack stat of course make her strong against Dragon type Pokemon in Clair's gym, including her 3 Dragonair. And as it turns out, Jinx's Psychic typing also makes her a strong choice for the Elite Four and Champion battles, giving her easy wins against Koga and Bruno especially. It's just important to point out that Jinx herself doesn't learn Psychic type moves by level up for some reason, so you'd have to catch a Jinx and get a Smoochum egg from it in order to have access to Confusion and Psychic, which Smoochum learns at levels 21 and 37 respectively. Now, while having Ice types to handle Clair's dragons is nice, it doesn't tell the whole story of the battle. So just like I did for Whitney's Miltank, let's take a look at Clair's ace Pokemon, Kingdra. Kingdra's stats and move pool can make this battle a bit difficult. For starters, Kingdra has very well-rounded stats with a base stat of 95 in both attack and defense stats, a base HP of 75, and a base speed of 85. This gives Kingdra a base stat total of 540, a decent amount higher than the base 490 total that Miltank had. The first thing we're pointing out here is those base 95 stats. The base 95 defense and special defense alongside the base HP of 75 actually makes Kingdra a fairly bulky Pokemon. It won't be tanking physical hits as well as Miltank does, but it will definitely have a better time of shrugging off special damage. Meanwhile, that base speed stat of 85 is also a pretty respectable one. Sure, you'll still be likely to outspeed Kingdra in some circumstances, but it's more than possible for Kingdra to move first, especially against slower Pokemon like Piloswine. Kingdra's move pool is also an interesting one, having two strong stab moves in Surf and Dragon Breath. The former is of course one of the strongest water type moves in the game, whereas the latter is an annoying move to get hit by since it has a 30% chance of causing paralysis. Honestly, I would say that Dragon Breath is actually more dangerous than Surf just because of that paralysis chance. Speaking of annoying issues like paralysis, Kingdra's only non-offensive move is Smokescreen, one of the most infuriating moves to deal with when playing Pokemon games since it can cause you to miss otherwise perfectly accurate moves. Overall, this combination of moves makes Kingdra an annoying Pokemon to deal with, but that's fine, right? Just hit it for weakness and everything will be a lot easier. Which brings us back to talking about ice types. It becomes evident from our previous conversation that you have access to some pretty good ice type Pokemon for this gym, or at least access to Pokemon that can learn Ice Punch by TM, all of which can help to make this gym much easier. However, this is where the battle against Clair and Kingdra becomes way too similar to the battle against Whitney's Miltank. In my earlier video about Whitney, I pointed out how it's hard to use fighting types against her since there aren't any good fighting types to use at that point in GSC, so you effectively have to battle that gym without being able to hit her Pokemon for weakness. And somehow, this is actually an even bigger issue against Clair. Kingdra, being a half dragon and half water type Pokemon, has probably the best typing that exists in the second generation, as water and dragon complement each other perfectly. First off, there's the fact that the dragon typing neutralizes water's weaknesses to electric and grass types, while the water typing neutralizes the ice weakness of the dragon type. This means that while you can sweep past her Dragonair with ice type moves, you'll have to come up with a different strategy for Kingdra. Fortunately, the dragon water typing isn't a perfect defensive type as it has one weakness, that of course being dragon itself. However, much like there was a lack of fighting type Pokemon with good moves to help you battle against Whitney, there's also a severe lack of dragon type moves available for you when you battle against Clair. In fact, there are only 3 dragon type moves that you can use against Kingdra, each of which has an issue with it. First off, there's the strongest dragon type move in the game, that being Outrage. This move was weaker back in the day than it is now, but it was still a base 90 power move back in the day, so it can hit Kingdra hard, or it would hit hard if the move was actually available to be used. I mean, technically you can have a Pokemon with Outrage for the battle against Clair, but the only Pokemon that can learn the move is Dratini, who learns Outrage at level 50. So if you want to use Outrage against Clair, you'd need to get a Dratini from the game corner in Goldenrod for 2100 coins and train it up to be 10 levels higher than her Kingdra, which will take an eternity for a Pokemon with a slow level curve in the infamously experienced lackluster Johto region. Moving down to power rankings, the next dragon type move available to you is the previously mentioned Dragon Breath. This is great since, as I've mentioned, that move has a 30% chance to cause paralysis, so you can both damage Kingdra and potentially paralyze it too. Except I'm lying when I say that Dragon Breath is available to you. Take a look at the list of Pokemon that learns this move by level up. You'll notice that there is literally not a single Pokemon that learns Dragon Breath unless it's by TM, and guess where you get the TM for Dragon Breath in this game? Yeah, that's clearly not happening. Lastly, there's... Okay, honestly, I don't even want to be mentioning this one, but for the sake of being thorough, it's Twister. Fuck Twister. Imagine going into the final gym of a Pokemon game and having your main strategy for dealing with the leader's ace Pokemon to be to use a Dragon type Tackle. For anyone who might be unfamiliar with this move, Twister is a dragon type move with a low base power of only 40, putting it on par with starting moves like Scratch and Tackle. While Twister does have a chance of flinching the opponent, it would barely do any damage to Kingdra, especially since the most common Pokemon to have this move is Gyarados, who has a low special attack stat and wouldn't even get Stab on the move. Ultimately, this means that you really do need to find some other strategy for dealing with Clair, assuming you can't just brute force your way past her Kingdra. And just like in my previous video, I do have an answer for you. In fact, my solution for this gym is pretty simple, and is actually how I used to beat Clair whenever I picked Cyndaquil as my starter when I was a kid. As it turns out, Clair's Kingdra will always be female, while your starter Pokemon has a 7 in 8 chance of being male. This means that you can teach the move Attract to your starter, giving you an easy way of potentially swinging RNG into your favor. Ironically, one of the best answers into this gym may actually be Meganium. Although usually considered to be one of the worst starter Pokemon in general, Meganium actually has the right tools to help give it an edge in this particular battle. Its grass typing lets it resist Surf, and its good HP alongside strong defense and special defense stats means it won't take too much damage from either Dragon Breath or Kingdra's fourth move, Hyper Beam. And while Smokescreen can still be annoying, you only need to land one Poison Powder to start damaging Kingdra over time. Interestingly enough, one of Meganium's main weaknesses can be bypassed with a bit of time and effort, which can make the battle against Kingdra exponentially easier. For some unknown reason, Game Freak decided that Chikorita and its evolutions shouldn't get access to Leech Seed by level up, only learning it as an egg move. But it is possible to get a Chikorita with the move well before you take on Clair. This however requires you to first play through the game with a specifically female Chikorita, or to get a female from hatched eggs, which of course is a pain either way thanks to that 7 in 8 male odds on starters that I mentioned previously. That being said, if you do make sure to get a female Chikorita, you can place it in the daycare with our old friend Execute, our MVP from the battle against Whitney. Alternatively, Chikorita can also learn Leech Seed from Hoppip, though Execute learns that move at a much lower level. Either way, you can have yourself a Meganium with Leech Seed for the battle against Clair. Personally, I would say that a move pool consisting of Leech Seed, Synthesis, Body Slam, and Razor Leaf would be perfect for taking on Kingdra. The first two moves are of course for longevity, while Body Slam is there to do the same thing that Dragon Breath does, a 30% chance of causing paralysis. This just about sums up why I think that Clair, despite not being the most difficult gym leader in the game, is by far the worst gym leader that I can remember. It's interesting to me how she is indirectly depicted as being a bad person in Crystal version, seeing as she can't pass a test that's basically asking if she treats Pokemon well, and even more interesting how Game Freak may have accidentally given Clair an ace Pokemon that effectively has no reliable weaknesses. I've got to admit though, I don't hate Kingdra as a Pokemon. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that Kingdra is one of my favorites. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel for some more Pokemon content. While I do primarily focus on the Mega Man Battle Network games on this channel, I'm still a big fan of Pokemon as well, and I do want to continue making these videos where I get to discuss various Pokemon related topics as well. And seeing as I just mentioned having Chikorita with Leech Seed available early on in the game, I just might do a test run of the games with Chikorita as my starter, just to see if it's actually as bad as people always claim for it to be. So be sure to check out that video whenever I do make that one, and as always, thanks for watching.